The illusion of power fades the moment someone dares to walk away from it. Among the wealthy, betrayal is rarely loud, but its reckoning always is. And when betrayal wears diamonds and marches down an aisle, the silence before the storm is deafening. A wealthy mogul weds his mistress, but when his wife arrives in breathtaking fashion, he immediately feels the weight of his mistake. In a world where pride, love, and legacy intertwine, how far would one go to reclaim what's theirs? Among the elite, secrets never stay buried long, and when the most powerful man in Los Angeles dares to publicly marry the woman he betrayed his wife for, all eyes shift to the elegant woman he so carelessly tossed aside. What no one knows is that she's not done yet. Our story begins with a dramatic entrance at the year's most extravagant wedding, an entrance destined to upend the city's elite circles. Trust us, you won't want to miss a second of this slow-burning storm. Jackson Wade Langford was revered across continents for building a ruthless business empire. He held investments in leading tech giants, helmed global charities, and maintained full control of Langford Holdings, a multifaceted conglomerate touching everything from renewable energy to luxury real estate. Media giants like the Los Angeles Times and Forbes celebrated him as the man who never lost. Still, behind the glossy profiles, whispers stirred in California's wealthiest enclaves. Jackson had been married to Vivienne Carlisle Langford, a legacy heiress from the storied Carlisle lineage, whose wealth shaped the West Coast for generations. Their union was once hailed as the perfect marriage of legacy and innovation. But lately, talk of Jackson's wandering eye had moved from rumor to accepted fact, especially where his new flame was concerned, Bianca Monroe. Unlike Vivienne's refined poise, rooted in old wealth and polished etiquette, Bianca was fire. A former fashion influencer turned lifestyle brand consultant, she thrived in the limelight. People said she wore ambition like expensive perfume, bold, lasting, and impossible to ignore. Their affair, splashed across gossip pages, was the worst-kept secret in Beverly Hills. Yet no one dared confront Jackson directly. In circles where wealth equals power, gossip is currency. But silence is survival. Still, behind the closed doors of their Bel Air penthouse, the damage was real. Vivienne had confronted him more than once. Jackson dismissed her calmly, always with a charming lie. "You're the only one," he'd murmur, pressing a kiss to her forehead, then return home later and later. Sometimes not at all. Staff at the Langford residence scrambled to hide signs of his escapades, but truth, like smoke, found its way through every crack in their crumbling marriage. It all came to a head one crisp fall evening. Vivienne quietly packed a single suitcase and walked out, leaving only a handwritten note on the marble kitchen counter. She'd had enough. Enough lies, enough disrespect. She was a Carlisle, raised with grace and dignity. If Jackson didn't value her, she'd create her own way forward. Her exit wasn't scandalous. It was masterful, discreet. The staff assumed she was away on business. So did Jackson. He didn't even notice she'd left until he found her side of the closet half empty. Standing before the gently swaying hangers, something twisted in his chest. But if he felt guilt, it quickly transformed into something darker. Relief. Perhaps, he reasoned, this was the clean break he needed to build a new future with Bianca. While Vivienne kept a low profile in San Francisco, staying with her cousin Dr. Camille Reyes, a respected cardiologist, Jackson made his boldest move yet. A declaration to the world he would marry Bianca. Legalities be damned. His divorce from Vivienne wasn't finalized. The public didn't know that. All they'd see was the grandest wedding the country had ever seen. That was all Jackson cared about. But that decision would ignite a spiral that would haunt him forever. News of Jackson's upcoming nuptials with Bianca ignited social media in seconds. Twitter and Instagram exploded. Though the couple didn't publicly confirm anything, details leaked fast. A private estate in Lake Como, Italy. A guest list stacked with Oscar winners, political elites, and venture capitalists. The media dubbed it the wedding of the decade. Paparazzi camped outside Langford Holdings and staked out Bianca's penthouse in downtown LA. Rumors swirled that Bianca had commissioned Enzo Mancini, the famed Milanese designer adored by socialites, to create a one-of-a-kind wedding gown. Silk from Lyon, pearls from Tokyo. Every detail meant to flaunt the allure that had first drawn Jackson to her. But while the world obsessed over floral arrangements and couture fittings, Vivienne was neither idle nor uninformed. She hadn't filed for divorce, and not even Camille could explain why. Was it strategy? Pride? Hope? Only Vivienne knew. One morning, while sipping Earl Grey in Camille's sunlit study, she read a brutal op-ed in Town & Country. The writer painted her as outdated, replaced by a flashier, younger woman, that her time had passed. Vivienne's cheeks flushed, not from humiliation, but from indignation. She wasn't just angry for herself. She was angry for every woman ever discarded for someone louder and shinier. "It's time to fight back," Camille said, seeing the fire in Vivienne's eyes. Vivienne nodded. She had connections, serious ones, the kind of people who didn't speak publicly but controlled narratives from behind velvet curtains. For the first time since her quiet departure, she decided to use them. Since leaving San Francisco, she felt the old embers of her fighting spirit ignite once again. Her next move was subtle but powerful. Vivienne reached out to Julian Park, a longtime family friend and seasoned investigative journalist who now worked for a reputable West Coast media outlet. Through calm, carefully worded conversations, she arranged to leak a significant story, a discreet but ongoing lawsuit filed by employees of Langford Holdings. The allegations? Workplace harassment and a toxic environment, all under Bianca's short-lived yet ruthless management tenure. Jackson had tried to bury the matter with high-powered legal teams and hush money, but the case simmered just beneath the surface, ready to boil over. The leak sparked a media frenzy overnight. Suddenly, Bianca wasn't being portrayed as a starry-eyed fiancée anymore. She was painted as an ambitious social climber with a dangerous streak. The wedding was still on, but for the first time, public sentiment wasn't fully on their side. Bianca was furious. She demanded that Jackson fix it immediately. He attempted to calm the storm by hiring a top-tier crisis PR firm, but tensions flared behind closed doors. It was their first true argument. Bianca accused Jackson of failing to protect her image. Jackson, in turn, resented her outbursts. After all, it was his status that had thrust her into the spotlight. This was the cost of the game. What neither of them realized was that Vivienne was only just beginning. In the weeks leading up to the opulent Lake Como wedding, alliances shifted and rivalries emerged. This was high society, where influence could be weaponized as quickly as a rumor. Vivienne, with quiet help from Camille Reyes, placed several discreet phone calls to well-connected women in their circle. She reached out to Genevieve Barrington, a major philanthropist and social powerhouse in LA, and Margot Devereux, a dear friend from her Swiss finishing school days. Both women had past grievances with Bianca. Genevieve, in particular, carried a deep grudge after Bianca had publicly belittled her charity work at a high-profile gala. Margot had once invited Bianca to an elite Napa Valley retreat, only to be coldly brushed off. The snub stung deeply, and both women were all too happy to lend their support when Vivienne confided in them. A plan began to take shape. Vivienne would attend the wedding. She hadn't been officially uninvited, and her marriage to Jackson remained legally intact. But she needed an angle, an entry point that would not only shame Jackson and Bianca, but also restore her dignity. More importantly, she needed to show the world who she truly was. Meanwhile, Jackson was barely holding things together. The date of the Italian wedding loomed closer. His PR team was operating at full throttle, trying to contain the fallout from the lawsuit and mounting gossip. In her usual bold fashion, Bianca decided that the best defense was a flashy offense. She invited a major streaming platform to document the final week leading up to the wedding. Marketed as a docu-series about modern love, it was, in reality, a vanity project meant to reframe her narrative. Cameras rolled non-stop. Bianca was filmed selecting flower arrangements, sampling artisan cakes, and overseeing a team of designers. To the outside world, it all looked like a dream. But behind the scenes, her temper flared often and dramatically whenever things fell short of her impossible standards. The docu-series producers whispered to one another that this might be the biggest unscripted hit they'd ever stumbled upon. During one especially tense moment, while trying on her custom Enzo Mancini gown, Bianca threw a bejeweled slipper across the atelier, enraged that the stitching on the train wasn't delicate enough. Enzo, known for his own artistic temperament, threatened to quit unless she curbed her tantrums. Jackson had to step in, offering the designer a massive bonus check just to keep him on board. It cost him dearly, but he believed salvaging his public image was worth the price. What none of them realized was that the biggest disruption was quietly building behind the scenes, crafted by none other than Vivienne Langford. Vivienne had always been the picture of grace, but beneath her calm demeanor lay a calculating mind shaped by a lifetime of boardroom strategy and old money etiquette. She'd grown up watching her father negotiate billion-dollar deals over 5-course dinners that resembled chess matches more than social affairs. She knew how to wait, how to watch, and how to strike precisely when the moment was right. Returning quietly to Los Angeles a week before the wedding, she checked into the Fairmont Century Plaza under the alias Veronica Hayes, a respectful nod to her grandmother's maiden name. She kept a low profile. Genevieve and Margot fed her daily updates on the wedding preparations, including which private jets were leaving, when, and where the most important guests were staying. Meanwhile, the lawsuit against Langford Holdings was gaining more attention. Several employees broke their silence, describing a culture of fear and unreasonable demands under Bianca's management. Julian Park's investigative reports were thorough and damning. He interviewed the plaintiffs, who described being mocked, overworked, and even threatened. Bianca's behavior was no longer just gossip, it was documented. The docuseries cameras tried to dance around the growing scandal, keeping the spotlight on lavish decor and picture-perfect moments. But social media wasn't fooled. Back at Langford Holdings, Jackson convened an emergency strategy meeting. Bianca, in Italy and wrapped in a silk robe, joined via video call. Her demeanor was cold and sharp. She demanded the board find a way to silence the plaintiffs and bury the story. The board, mostly composed of traditional businessmen, was unsettled by her aggressiveness. It was one thing to defend Jackson, the golden goose. But Bianca? She was starting to look like a liability. She barked orders, instructing them to bribe or intimidate the plaintiffs into silence. A few exchanged nervous glances. It was one thing to protect Jackson, he was the golden goose. But Bianca was rapidly becoming a liability. From her hidden vantage point, Vivienne decided it was time to act. She would attend the wedding, flanked by her closest allies. But she needed more than just dramatic flair. She needed irrefutable evidence to flip public opinion in her favor. So she arranged for a hidden camera and microphone, discreetly sewn into her vintage designer clutch. It had been rigged by an old college friend who now specialized in high-level surveillance tech for government contractors. By capturing chaos, cruelty, or even direct admissions of wrongdoing, Vivienne hoped to dismantle the facade of this sham wedding and shield the employees who'd suffered under Bianca's reign. More than that, she wanted the world to see that she wasn't a scorned wife to be pitied, but a strategist to be reckoned with. The wedding was to be held at a centuries-old estate perched atop the cliffs of Bellagio, offering sweeping views of Lake Como. Tall hedges and wrought-iron gates shielded the property from prying eyes. Private security patrolled the perimeter, but it didn't stop paparazzi from lining the winding approach roads, desperate for a million-dollar photo. Guests arrived via luxury sedans, private helicopters, and chartered yachts. A-list celebrities, Grammy-winning performers, and a parade of billionaire investors linked to Jackson. Bianca soaked in the grandeur, relishing her newfound social elevation. Even her father, Harold Monroe, mostly absent throughout her life, showed up in a rented tux, wide-eyed at how far his daughter had come. In her pursuit of exclusivity, Bianca ordered that all guests surrender their phones upon entry. Security swept for hidden cameras. No one was allowed to overshadow the official documentary crew with exclusive rights to film the event. Unbeknownst to her, a camera had already entered. Tucked inside the clutch of the woman Bianca never imagined would dare to show her face, Vivienne Langford. Vivienne emerged from a sleek black car, resplendent in a floor-length midnight blue gown from the Carlyle family collection, flanked by Genevieve and Margot, heads turned. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some recognized her instantly and respectfully kept their distance. Others openly stared, captivated by the silent tension she brought in her wake. Chin raised, spine straight, Vivienne's presence made it clear. She had not come to be humiliated. She had come to reclaim control. But inside, she could feel her heartbeat drumming like a war cry in her chest. Her heels clicked with practiced poise, yet every step toward the villa felt like walking a tightrope. It wasn't fear of Bianca or Jackson, but the quiet, gnawing fear that she might falter under the weight of all eyes. That one misplaced glance, one cracked note in her voice, might shatter the resolve she had so meticulously rebuilt. She breathed in slowly, drawing strength from the steady presence of Genevieve and Margot flanking her. Reminders that she was not alone. Not this time. Staff guided the guests into a sprawling courtyard filled with white orchids, floating candles, and the sound of a trickling fountain. A live string quartet played in the background, while the setting sun bathed the peach-colored villa walls in a romantic golden light. It was a scene lifted straight from a glossy wedding magazine. Inside a private suite, Bianca sat getting her makeup touched up as the docu-series cameras hovered around her. She was oblivious to Vivienne's arrival. Jackson, however, was not. The wedding coordinator, visibly shaken, interrupted him mid-prep. "Mr. Langford, sir, your wife has arrived." Jackson went pale. A jolt of dread shot through him. He considered having security escort her out, but quickly realized how that might backfire. The scandal would be enormous. He told the coordinator to let her stay for now. He needed time to formulate a plan. Adjusting his bow tie in front of an ornate mirror, Jackson couldn't shake the sick feeling that he had badly miscalculated Vivienne. The ceremony was set to begin at sunset. That golden hour when the lake shimmered and every photo looked ethereal. Rows of white chairs faced a marble altar blanketed in white roses. Guests murmured in anticipation as the cameras slowly panned across the crowd, capturing a slow-brewing sense of unease. Jackson stood at the altar, maintaining the facade of a confident groom, but internally his thoughts were in turmoil. He remembered Vivienne's look of steely defiance from past confrontations, calm, composed, and dangerously precise. He told himself it was fine. The wedding was happening. He had the upper hand. She wouldn't dare make a scene, and yet sweat bloomed beneath his perfectly tailored tuxedo. At last, Bianca appeared at the end of the aisle, arm in arm with her father. She wore her custom Enzo Mancini gown, a shimmering masterpiece that hugged her body before flowing into an intricate lace train. The crowd gasped. Cameras zoomed in on her triumphant smile as she basked in the attention and envy of the room. Jackson watched her walk toward him. He reminded himself, this was the future. His decision, his new beginning. But just then, the collective hush gave way to a ripple of gasps and frenzied whispers. Heads turned. Not toward the bride, but toward the back of the courtyard. From the opposite end, Vivienne stepped into the aisle with a calm, commanding air. The ceremony hadn't officially begun. The officiant was still waiting for Bianca to reach the altar. Vivienne's sudden entrance froze everything. Bianca halted, confused, torn between continuing or confronting this unexpected challenge. Her father leaned in and whispered something. She clutched his arm tighter. The docuseries cameras whipped around to capture the confrontation in real time. Vivienne was composed, her gaze fixed on Jackson. Genevieve and Margot remained at the edge of the aisle, ready to intervene if needed. You could hear a pin drop. Vivienne took a slow step forward, her voice steady and graceful as she addressed the guests. "Good evening, everyone," she said. "I don't mean to interrupt this celebration." She paused, letting the silence thicken with tension. "But I believe some clarity is needed," she said. Jackson opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. Bianca's face contorted in fury and disbelief. Her father, stunned by such brazen defiance, instinctively stepped back. Vivienne continued, "I'm Vivienne Carlyle Langford, Jackson's wife. As many of you know, we haven't finalized our divorce." She let the words hang in the air. "There are unresolved matters, and while this ceremony is impressive, it doesn't override certain legal truths." Bianca let out a strangled cry. "What are you doing here?" she shrieked. She yanked herself from her father's side and stormed down the aisle until she stood just feet from Vivienne, trembling with rage. The documentary cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of the confrontation. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few guests even stood, bracing themselves for chaos. Vivienne didn't flinch. "I'm here to remind you all," she said firmly, "that no matter how extravagant the affair, no matter how curated the guest list or polished the PR narrative, truth can't be bought or buried. Jackson is still my husband, and this, she swept her hand across the scene, this spectacle is a farce, not just against me, but against the institution you claim to honor. Bianca, seething, turned to Jackson. Do something, have her removed. Security guards hesitated, unsure how to proceed. Vivienne was, after all, the legal wife. Jackson finally spoke, his voice shaking. Vivienne, please, let's discuss this privately. Don't cause a scene. Vivienne gave a bitter laugh. You caused this scene long before I ever arrived. And with that, the ceremony imploded. The docu-series cameras were still rolling as guests whispered in confusion. Some began to leave. The officiant stood stunned, clutching a leather-bound book and glancing around helplessly for instruction. Then, as if orchestrated by fate, a thunderous crack split the sky. Dark clouds that had gathered over the lake unleashed a torrential downpour, sending the glamorous affair spiraling into chaos. Guests screamed, scrambling to cover their designer outfits. Men ducked under the floral arches. The officiant's book was soaked. Equipment sizzled and shorted out. Bianca's immaculate hairstyle wilted into soggy strands. Vivienne calmly stepped back, raising an umbrella handed to her by a poised and prepared Margot. Without a word, she turned and disappeared into the villa. Bianca shouted after her, voice lost to the wind and rain. Jackson stood frozen, drenched and humiliated, unable to grasp how quickly everything had unraveled. And this was only the beginning. Inside the villa's opulent drawing room, guests huddled together, trying to dry off and salvage their evening. Rain lashed the windows. The once idyllic lakeside setting now blurred behind sheets of gray. Jackson and Bianca retreated to a private lounge. The docu-series cameras followed like vultures. This is all your fault, Bianca shrieked, mascara streaking down her cheeks, tears mixing with rainwater. You said she wouldn't be a problem. You promised me this day would be perfect. Jackson had no answer. Shame and rage gripped his throat. He glanced at the cameras, wishing they'd cut, but they were under contract. This was exactly the drama they wanted. Meanwhile, Vivienne was safe in her suite. She carefully removed the recording device from her clutch and called Julian Park, who was waiting for her update back in LA. I got it, she said simply. All of it, the meltdown, the confrontation, every moment. Julian was ecstatic. If released, the footage would go viral and completely dismantle the PR fantasy Jackson and Bianca had built. But Vivienne had more than viral fame in mind. She intended to use the footage to support the plaintiffs in the harassment lawsuit. Bianca's explosive, abusive behavior caught on camera would add crucial weight to their claims. Just then, Genevieve knocked, Margot beside her. Both women were breathless, exhilarated. We should leave, Margot said. Before security corners you. Tension's rising out there. Vivienne nodded. Her gaze was steel. I'm done here. Outside, the storm continued as security struggled to protect gear. Vivienne and her allies slipped away unnoticed, climbing into a waiting car. Tires churned through puddles as the gates shut behind them. Vivienne exhaled slowly. Phase 1 was complete. Back inside, Bianca paced furiously, ranting about salvaging the wedding. Jackson, drained, finally said, It's over, Bianca. We can't go on with this tonight. The officiant's gone. Half the guests have left. The storm, just let it go. Bianca's eyes burned. We'll do it tomorrow, or whenever the rain stops. I'll pay extra to keep everyone here. We can still pull this off. Jackson stared at her, unsettled by her desperation. Perhaps for the first time, he truly saw her. Someone willing to do anything to preserve an illusion. But that illusion was shattering, and with it came the icy sting of regret. By morning, the storm had passed, revealing a breathtaking sunrise over the lake. But inside the villa, unease lingered. Many guests had already fled the chaos, unwilling to be associated with scandal. A small crowd remained, mostly the documentary crew and a few die-hard associates of Jackson, though their loyalty to Bianca was doubtful. Social media erupted. Clips of Vivienne's interruption, captured on guests' phones before being confiscated, went viral. The official docu-series footage wasn't even out yet, but the raw phone videos were already damning. Media outlets around the world feasted on the scandal. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire's wife crashes wedding to mistress." Langford empire in crisis as lawsuits pile up. Simultaneously, Bianca's meltdown eclipsed any lingering sympathy the public might have felt for her. Rumors circulated that Enzo Mancini was threatening to remove his name from her gown, unwilling to be associated with such disgrace. Staff at the estate reported Bianca had barricaded herself in a suite, refusing to come out except to hurl insults at anyone who dared knock. Meanwhile, Jackson sat alone in the villa's library, staring into a glass of whiskey. The docuseries producer approached quietly. "Should we keep filming?" they asked. Jackson's thoughts swirled. Rage, confusion, regret. After a long pause, he nodded. "Keep rolling." Maybe part of him wanted a record of the fallout, a cautionary tale. Or maybe he still believed he could salvage his image if he managed the narrative just right. But beneath that belief was a gnawing void, one he hadn't felt in decades. Without his empire, without the myth of invincibility he'd spent years constructing, who was he really? In that moment, staring at his own reflection in the dark glass, he didn't see the tycoon. He saw a man who had burned his legacy for a thrill and ended up hollow. He didn't just regret the scandal, he feared the silence that might follow once the cameras finally stopped rolling. But that afternoon, another blow landed. A U.S. court issued an injunction, freezing certain assets of Langford Holdings due to the mounting employee lawsuit. It was a seismic move, signaling that the allegations were being taken seriously. It couldn't have come at a worse time. Jackson had been poised to sign a multi-million-dollar deal with a major European pharmaceutical conglomerate that same week. Now, with key assets frozen, everything was in jeopardy. By evening, Bianca emerged from her self-imposed exile. Gone was the elaborate wedding gown. In its place, she wore a simple slip dress. Her hair was pulled back, face stripped of earlier bravado. She approached Jackson with a quiet tone. "We can still fix this," she whispered. "Let's just move forward with the wedding, quietly. We have enough people, enough resources to make it official." Jackson looked at her, exhausted. "Bianca, can't you see what's happening? The courts are involved. My wife, Vivienne, has evidence. Public sentiment is against us. Half the guests have left. The company's in crisis." Bianca reached for his shoulder. "We're stronger together. If we show unity, we might still control the story." Something inside him broke. He remembered Vivienne's warmth, her strength, their shared dreams. He thought of her insight, her poise, her unwavering loyalty. What had he gained by chasing Bianca's fire? Suddenly, the illusion of Bianca, the fantasy he'd built up in his head, felt hollow. "I'm not sure we are better together," Jackson said, his voice low but certain. "I think I made a mistake." Bianca's eyes widened. Tears, of rage or heartbreak, he couldn't tell, welled up. But before she could reply, the red light of the docuseries cameras caught her eye. Instantly, her posture changed. She adjusted her face, her stance as if searching for the most flattering angle. Jackson saw it all, the transformation. And in that moment he realized she wasn't in love with him. She was in love with the title, being Mrs. Langford. With a tired sigh, he looked at the producers. "Turn those off," he said. 4 days later, Jackson landed in San Francisco. He stepped off his private jet with a nervous energy he hadn't felt in years. He'd left Bianca in Italy, buried in the ruins of their failed wedding. He had also canceled all future filming, effectively shutting down the docuseries. The damage was too vast. It was time to face the real problem, Vivienne. A black car took him to Dr. Camille Reyes's home, where he knew Vivienne had been staying. The cozy brownstone stood in stark contrast to the sleek luxury of their Bel Air penthouse, but it radiated something far more valuable: warmth, truth. He knocked, his heart pounded. Camille opened the door. Her expression was unreadable, part wary, part stern. "She's in the study," she said, stepping aside. Vivienne was seated by a window, reading through a stack of legal documents. She looked up as he entered, setting the papers aside. Neither spoke. The air was thick with everything unsaid. Finally, Jackson spoke, his voice softer than she'd heard in years. "Vivienne, I'm sorry." She watched him. His face was worn, his posture deflated. "What are you sorry for?" she asked, voice calm. He lowered his gaze. "For everything. For betraying your trust, for humiliating you, for letting myself get caught up in something that meant nothing." Vivienne's expression didn't change, but her eyes revealed a flicker of sadness. "This wasn't just humiliation, Jackson," she said. "You broke what we built. Our marriage meant something to me." He nodded slowly. Pain flickered across his face. "It meant something to me too. I lost sight of that. And now, I'm paying for it. My company's in crisis. That wedding is a global joke. But more than that, I hurt you. You, the one person who cared for me before any of this." He gestured vaguely, as if dismissing the billionaire facade. Vivienne folded her hands in her lap. "I won't lie. It felt good seeing justice catch up, especially for the employees Bianca tormented. But this isn't just about payback." Jackson swallowed hard. "I know. That's why I'm going to do everything I can to make it right. For them and for you." He swallowed hard. "I understand. I want to make things right, legally and morally. I'll cooperate with your attorneys. Whatever it takes." Their eyes met for the first time in years, and for a fleeting moment, something honest and unguarded passed between them. "I appreciate that," Vivienne said softly. "But as for us, I don't know if things can ever be the same." Jackson's voice faltered. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. At least, not now. I just wanted you to know. I regret everything. If there's any chance we could talk, even just for closure, I'd be grateful." Vivienne exhaled slowly, like she was releasing years of tension. "I think we both need to figure out what comes next, outside of the expectations we used to have. But yes, I'm willing to talk, to find a way forward, even if it's not the path we once planned." In the months since Lake Como, Vivienne had faced more than just the legal and public fallout. She'd faced herself. There were nights when she couldn't sleep, haunted not by Jackson's betrayal, but by the quiet fear that maybe she hadn't been enough, not bold enough, not captivating enough. Some mornings, she avoided mirrors entirely, afraid of what she might no longer recognize. These were the parts of heartbreak no one glamorized. And yet, each day she rose, stronger not because she was unbroken, but because she kept going despite the cracks. In that moment, Jackson realized there was still a sliver of hope. Not for rekindling their marriage, perhaps, but for redemption. For taking accountability, for becoming someone Vivienne might one day respect again. A sharp winter wind swept through the streets of San Francisco, marking the months that had passed since the Lake Como debacle, an event that derailed not only their lives, but the reputations of everyone involved. Langford Holdings moved quickly in the aftermath. Under public and legal scrutiny, Jackson agreed to a formal hearing that resulted in a massive financial settlement. The company implemented sweeping workplace reforms and adopted a zero-tolerance policy on misconduct. Bianca Monroe, whose actions had sparked the lawsuit, was permanently barred from any leadership or consulting role within the company. Though she avoided direct legal prosecution, she was ordered to pay substantial damages. On morning talk shows, she wept dramatically, insisting she'd been misunderstood, a victim of tabloid cruelty. But the tide had turned. High society quietly shut its doors. Invitations dried up. Her once glossy social media feed, filled with designer tags and airbrushed selfies, took on a tone of desperation, as though she were clinging to relevance by her manicured fingertips. Vivienne, meanwhile, emerged with a newfound sense of purpose. She partnered with Genevieve Barrington to launch the Carlisle-Barrington Initiative, a foundation advocating for safe, inclusive workplaces for women and marginalized employees. The scandal had ignited a wave of public support. Their first fundraising gala raised millions. The funds went toward legal aid, leadership development programs, and reform-focused campaigns aimed at dismantling systemic abuse in corporate culture. For Jackson, the fallout forced him into a long-overdue reckoning. He could no longer hide behind the polished image of a self-made mogul. Stepping down as CEO, temporarily at least, was both a strategic and deeply personal act. An interim board took over the company's day-to-day operations, while Jackson turned inward. He sought therapy, attended executive retreats, consulted with crisis communications experts. He wasn't just managing the PR crisis, he was trying to rediscover who he was before the ambition, before the spotlight, before the fall. Still, one question lingered above all others. Vivienne. He replayed their wedding confrontation in his mind. Her calm composure, the cutting precision of her words. He thought of their earlier years together. Quiet walks through her family's vineyards, late-night brainstorming at their shared kitchen table, her gentle critiques that always improved his work. These memories looped like a reel through his empty penthouse. One cold December night, Jackson wandered aimlessly down a bustling Union Square, dodging holiday shoppers and pausing before the glittering storefronts. He felt drawn to the soft glow of Grace Cathedral, its towering spires rising through the fog. Seeking shelter, seeking something, he slipped inside. Rows of pews stretched before him, lit by flickering votive candles. Colored light from the stained glass windows danced across the marble floor. He sat near the front, ran a hand over his tired face, and closed his eyes. Scenes from the past year flooded him, the rush of his affair, the thrill of rebellion, and finally, the emptiness that followed. He didn't know if he was praying or just wishing something would help him make sense of it all. Then he felt it, a gentle hand on his shoulder. He looked up, heart hammering. Vivienne stood beside him, wrapped in a wool coat and scarf. Her presence, so unexpected, sent a rush of emotion through him. "I heard you've been coming here," she said softly. Her voice echoed in the hush of the cathedral. "Camille told me. I wanted to see for myself." A swell of feelings, gratitude, hope, anxiety, tightened in his chest. I never thought you'd come," he managed, moving aside to make space. She sat beside him, hands folded in her lap. "Seems we both have a lot on our minds," she murmured, gazing up at the cathedral's high arches. "This place makes you feel small, and sometimes that's exactly what we need, to remember what really matters." Jackson exhaled slowly, as if releasing months of shame. "I've done terrible things, to you, to us. I don't know if an apology will ever be enough." Vivienne was quiet for a long time. The candlelight shimmered in her eyes. "No, it won't fix everything," she said. "But seeing you here, taking responsibility for once, that means something." "Bianca's out of my life," Jackson said. "Completely. The wedding wasn't even legally binding, and she's gone from the company. We have no connection, personal or professional." Vivienne offered a faint, bittersweet smile. "I never imagined we'd find ourselves in a cathedral, talking about the ruins of what used to be a loving marriage," Vivienne said, her voice quiet, thoughtful. "But life rarely sticks to a script." She turned to face Jackson, her gaze steady. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about our marriage, how two people can become so lost even when they seem to have everything. Somewhere along the way, we forgot who we were." Jackson swallowed hard, emotion catching in his throat. "I forgot you. The real you, and I forgot who I used to be before ambition became my only compass." Outside, snow had begun to fall over the quiet San Francisco streets. Inside the cathedral, they were sheltered, two souls fumbling their way toward forgiveness. Vivienne let the silence linger, as if weighing whether she could trust him again. Finally, she spoke. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to forget what you did," she said. "But I've learned a lot these past few months. About my strength, about my purpose. And yes, there's a part of me that still hopes you can learn from all of this." A blend of relief and uncertainty crossed Jackson's face. "I want to," he said simply. "I've started therapy. I'm working with the interim board to make sure I don't fall into those same patterns. If there's any way we can find common ground, not now, maybe, but someday, I'll do whatever it takes." Vivienne nodded slowly, choosing her words carefully. "Let's start by admitting we've both changed. We may never get back what we had, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we can build something new, cautiously, respectfully. And if it doesn't work," she added, "at least we'll know we tried." Jackson reached out and gently covered her hand with his. She didn't pull away. The tension in her shoulders softened. As he felt her fingers relax beneath his, something fragile rose in his chest. Hope, maybe, or fear disguised as it. Deep down, Jackson knew. He didn't deserve this moment. Not yet, and maybe never. But he also knew he couldn't bear to lose it. Not again. That quiet, unspoken terror of messing it all up once more gripped him harder than any business failure ever had. It was a small, trembling moment, lit by candlelight and framed by the distant hum of traffic outside the cathedral walls. "All I ask is for the chance to try," he whispered. She nodded, a tear glinting in her eye. And in that sacred hush, they found something fragile, not a clean slate, but an opening. A small step away from regret toward the possibility of renewal. A pale sun broke through the steel-gray clouds over San Francisco, glinting off the city's skyline. Months passed, slowly bleeding into a year since the Lake Como disaster that had brought everything crashing down. In that time, life carried on, in quieter, more meaningful ways. Vivienne and Jackson didn't reconcile overnight. Instead, they moved cautiously, like people who'd once been burned but remained strangely hopeful for warmth. Their first steps were tentative. Occasional check-in calls, polite emails about joint investments and taxes, updates about friends or family. The ice between them, once glacial, began to crack. Eventually, they agreed to couples therapy, not in hopes of rekindling things, but to process the trauma, disappointment, and resentment that had built up like pressure behind a dam. In the discreet office of Dr. Martina Kaplan, a renowned marital counselor in Nob Hill, they started slowly, haltingly. "I felt invisible," Vivienne confessed one afternoon. Her voice trembled, equal parts sorrow and relief. "I was doing everything I could to hold us together, and you were already chasing something else." Across from her, Jackson looked down at his clasped hands. "I convinced myself I deserved anything I wanted," he admitted. "And in the process, I lost the only thing that really mattered." Week by week, their sessions shifted from blame to understanding. They didn't solve everything. Life rarely ties things up in neat little bows, but they created a space to explore whether their foundation was still solid. Meanwhile, Langford Holdings underwent sweeping changes. Following the massive legal settlement and the adoption of new corporate policies, the company was placed under the guidance of an interim board, seasoned professionals who valued ethics as much as profit. They implemented wellness programs, protected whistleblowers, and partnered with the Carlisle Barrington Initiative, Vivienne's foundation with Genevieve Barrington, to ensure workplace reform continued. Jackson, for his part, kept a low profile. He attended only the most essential board meetings. He avoided flashy appearances. When reporters ambushed him outside Langford Holdings' sleek Pacific Heights headquarters, he issued calm statements about cultural reform and accountability. Few believed him at first. How could they? After such a high-profile scandal, words meant little. But the slow, deliberate pace at which the company rebuilt its integrity began to win over even the harshest critics. Vivienne, meanwhile, poured herself into expanding the Carlisle Barrington Initiative. What started as a modest mission quickly transformed into a national force. They sponsored legal clinics, funded scholarships for women in business, and held high-level summits on ethical leadership. As their success grew, major corporations reached out for consultation, hoping to avoid the fate that had brought Langford Holdings to its knees. Vivienne and Genevieve became leading voices for workplace transformation, turning scandal into a constructive mission. Even once skeptical media outlets began publishing editorials praising Vivienne's leadership, calling her a voice of reason for a new era. Amid all the changes, Bianca Monroe still lingered in the public consciousness, but never quite reclaimed her former shine. She tried to monetize her infamy, launching a line of self-branded goods from perfumes to minimalist athleisure, but the controversies followed her like an anchor. A leaked behind-the-scenes video of her berating her creative team went viral, further sullying her image. Tabloids occasionally featured her fleeting romances with other wealthy men, but none lasted. Rumors swirled of a tell-all memoir or reality show based on her version of the Langford fiasco, but the public had grown weary. Every new attempt reeked of desperation, and soon even her social media following began to shrink. Her star had fallen, and no amount of curated content could stop gravity. Meanwhile, Jackson and Vivienne began taking increasingly meaningful steps toward understanding each other again. Their weekends filled with familiar routines, ones that had bonded them in their early marriage. They visited art galleries, lingering in front of certain paintings to quietly debate the techniques. Sometimes they chose recipes to cook together, laughing over spice choices in a warm, homey kitchen that had replaced the sterile marble counters of their old Bel Air penthouse. They sipped wine from mismatched glasses and found joy in the imperfections. Paparazzi attempted to track the progress of their potential reunion, but the lack of dramatic showdowns made them lose interest. With no explosive arguments, no teary public confessions, the tabloids had nothing to cling to. The couple's refusal to feed the spectacle slowly pushed them out of the media spotlight. Their therapy sessions became less frequent, no longer a necessity, but a check-in. Their conversations shifted from painful memories to the future. Could they trust again? Could their bond hold through another storm? They didn't know the answers, but they were committed to asking the questions. One crisp autumn afternoon, under a canopy of amber and crimson leaves, Jackson and Vivienne strolled through San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. The air was filled with the scent of wood smoke and roasted chestnuts from nearby vendors. No bodyguards trailed behind. No assistants jotted notes. just two people, side by side, rediscovering the city and each other. They reached a footbridge draped in golden ivy, pausing to watch paddle boats glide across the lake. A breeze scattered leaves across the water's surface, shimmering under the soft sun. Vivienne turned to Jackson. Have you ever noticed how couples come to bridges like this for proposals? Wedding photos? Even just quiet dances? Jackson followed her gaze to a young couple at the center of the bridge, posing for a photo. A smile flickered at the corner of his mouth. I guess bridges are places for second chances, he said. New beginnings for all kinds of love stories. She nodded, tucking a curl behind her ear. I think about second chances a lot these days. They fell silent, letting the rhythm of the city hum around them, soft horns in the distance, quiet footsteps on the path. Jackson turned to her. His voice was sincere. I never thought I'd be given one with you, but I'm trying to do better, not just for myself, but for us. And for the people who look to us to lead. Vivienne reached for his hand, a small gesture, but it carried the weight of everything they'd endured. Her voice, filled with cautious hope, answered, I've seen your effort. I've felt the difference. You listen now. You reflect. We still have a long road ahead, but I'd rather walk it together than alone. He squeezed her hand gently. Me too. They stood there, watching the shadows ripple across the water. What began with betrayal and heartbreak had circled back to a quiet sort of hope. It wouldn't ever be the same, but they had made peace with that. Growth meant letting the old selves fall away, like autumn leaves, so something stronger could take root. Langford Holdings, under its new leadership structure, flourished. The culture shifted from one of fear to one of empathy and ethics. The Carlisle-Barrington Initiative expanded globally, championing fair labor, gender equity, and workplace reform. Bianca remained on the fringes, occasionally surfacing in headlines that sparked then faded. As another breeze rustled through the trees above, Jackson turned to Vivienne with a rare smile, one full of playfulness and clarity. You know, he said, for the first time in a long while, I'm actually looking forward to tomorrow. Vivienne's lips curved. So am I. Let's see what we can build together. And with that, they walked hand in hand across the bridge, blending into the crowd of parkgoers who had no idea they were brushing shoulders with a billionaire and his wife. Two people who had fallen, risen, and dared to rebuild. Their story, once marred by scandal, was now anchored by a conscious choice to move forward, to face the damage and choose redemption. Sometimes the greatest battles aren't waged in boardrooms or on red carpets, but in the quiet chambers of the heart. And in the end, Jackson learned that true wealth wasn't measured in empire valuations or media accolades, but in loyalty, humility, and dignity. And Vivienne emerged more powerful than ever, not just defending her own self-respect, but fighting for those still trapped under abusive power structures. Their journey through betrayal, chaos, and ultimately renewal proves that even the most fractured bonds can be rebuilt, with honest regret, determination, and a willingness to heal. Dear friend, sometimes life doesn't offer clean slates, it offers bridges. Quiet, unassuming places where we pause, reflect, and choose whether to carry the weight of our past or lay it down and begin again. Jackson and Vivienne's story reminds us that healing isn't loud. It's found in small gestures, in choosing growth over pride, and in meeting each other halfway, even after deep pain. As the Stoics say, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Real strength lies in how you respond. Let their journey be a soft echo in your heart, a reminder that redemption isn't given, it's earned, with humility and consistent effort. Because even the most broken stories can lead to beautiful rebuilds. If this story stirred something in you, we'd love your support. Please like, share, and subscribe so we can keep bringing you more heartfelt stories that stay with you long after the screen fades.